What would you do if you discovered your spouse's darkest secret just hours after saying, I do? Can a marriage built on lies ever be salvaged, especially when those lies are shielded by faith? What happens when a life of moral integrity is just a facade for a much darker reality? Imagine the perfect wedding day that suddenly spirals into a nightmare. Within just 24 hours, a story of love and commitment morphs into a chilling saga of deceit. What could be so dark to transform a celebration into a catastrophic tragedy overnight? Join us on True Crime Stories ZM as we peel back the layers of a most unsettling paradox. Subscribe and follow us on this journey into the darkness lurking behind a veil of righteousness. In the small town where everyone knew each other's business, Jonathan Price was a figure of moral authority, a preacher whose voice boomed across the pews of the old brick church that had stood as the community's spiritual epicenter for over a century. But Jonathan's journey to the pulpit was paved with trials that few in his congregation could imagine. As a child, he had felt the sting of ridicule from his peers, a persistent torment that left deep scars on his young psyche. These experiences taught him early on the power of perception. He learned that to be vulnerable was to be weak, and weakness was something he could not afford. To shield himself from the harsh judgments of the world, Jonathan crafted a persona of unshakable confidence and devout religious commitment. He poured himself into the scriptures, his voice rising in passionate sermons that captivated his listeners, drawing them into his orbit. He spoke of righteousness and the path to salvation with such fervor that no one could guess the insecurities that lurked beneath his poised exterior. His transformation was not merely an act of self-preservation, but a performance that became his reality. The more he immersed himself in his role, the more he convinced not only his followers, but himself, that he was the embodiment of the virtues he preached. To the outside world, Jonathan Price was a beacon of hope and a pillar of the community, a man who had overcome his humble beginnings to lead his flock towards a brighter, more spiritual path. Yet, behind the closed doors of his study, where the last rays of the setting sun cast long shadows across the floor, Jonathan wrestled with the memories of his past. The laughter of children calling him names, the whispers of doubt that echoed in his mind, challenging his worthiness. These were the demons he battled nightly. In these moments of solitude, he questioned whether his faith was a shield against his past or a shroud masking a truth he dared not face. This internal conflict was the catalyst for the man he would become, driven by a need to protect his carefully constructed identity at any cost. Little did he know, the very secrets he fought so hard to bury would soon surface, threatening to shatter the illusion he had created. In stark contrast to Jonathan's concealed struggles, Elaine Foster was a beacon of genuine warmth and optimism in the same small town. A teacher in her late 20s, Elaine's radiant smile and compassionate nature made her a favorite among her young students and respected among her peers. Her classroom was a sanctuary of hope and learning, decorated with colorful posters and student artwork, each corner a testament to her dedication to nurturing young minds. And Elaine's life was deeply rooted in the principles of her faith and the close-knit fabric of her community. Raised in a family where Sunday dinners were sacrosanct and community service was as routine as morning prayers, she embodied the values she was brought up with: kindness, patience, and a steadfast belief in doing good. Her spirit was infectious, her energy boundless, and her commitment to her beliefs unwavering. Her evenings were often spent volunteering at local shelters or organizing church events, always believing that the best way to live her faith was to act on it. Aileen saw the good in everyone, a trait that not only made her beloved, but also occasionally naive to the more complex motives of those around her. It was during one of her church-organized community drives that Elaine first encountered Jonathan Price. Captivated by his eloquence and the resonant passion of his sermons, she felt an immediate connection. Jonathan, in turn, was drawn to Elaine's sincerity and the ease with which she practiced her faith. So natural and unforced, it challenged his own more calculated expressions of piety. Their friendship blossomed quickly, marked by deep conversations and shared dreams of building a stronger community. Unbeknownst to Elaine, her simple and honest nature slowly began to peel back the layers of Jonathan's meticulously crafted persona, setting the stage for a relationship that promised to merge two paths in a quest for shared spiritual fulfillment. Yet, as their bond deepened, the truths hidden in the shadows awaited their turn to emerge, threatening to unravel not just the ties between them, but also the very lives they had each worked so hard to build. As their relationship grew, Jonathan found in Elaine not just a partner, but an unwitting guardian of his vulnerabilities. Their meetings, often framed by the afterglow of evening services or during church activities, provided Jonathan with a sense of safety, a reprieve from his internal conflicts. Elaine's belief in his sermons and her admiration for his commitment to faith only deepened his affection for her. Yet, with each moment, the weight of his concealed truths grew heavier. Jonathan had long preached chastity until marriage, a principle he publicly championed not only as a moral stance but also as a personal shield. This vow, while aligning perfectly with his religious teachings, served a dual purpose. It masked his deep-seated insecurities about his physical self, insecurities that could potentially derail the respect and authority he had built over the years. As their relationship took a more serious turn towards engagement, Jonathan's anxiety intensified. The closer they came to a binding commitment, the more palpable his fear became of what might happen once the protective barriers of chastity were no longer there to shield his secret. This fear was not just about the exposure of his physical inadequacies, but also about the potential loss of Elaine's respect and love once she discovered the truth. Elaine, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing within Jonathan, continued to plan their future with bright-eyed optimism. Her dreams of marriage were filled with visions of a partnership rooted in shared faith and mutual support. She looked forward to a future where their spiritual and earthly journeys would merge, completely oblivious to the fact that Jonathan's vows of chastity were as much a fortress guarding him from exposure as they were a testament to his faith. So, the disparity between their perceptions of the future created an undercurrent of tension that subtly colored their interactions as the wedding day approached. Jonathan's usual eloquence began to falter at times, and moments of distance crept into times that were once marked by closeness and warmth. While Elaine attributed these changes to pre-wedding jitters, Jonathan knew the truth was far more complex, a truth that threatened to undo the very fabric of the life he had fought so hard to weave. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, a perfect emblem of Elaine's hopes for their future together. The church was lavishly decorated with white lilies and roses, the aisles adorned with ribbons, and the soft light of candles. Their small town had come alive with the buzz of excitement, as friends, family, and congregation members filled the church, eager to witness the union of two of their most beloved individuals. Jonathan stood at the altar, his demeanor calm and his smile steady, exuding the charisma and confidence that had always been his hallmark. But beneath this composed exterior, a tempest of anxiety and fear churned. Every minute that ticked closer to the consummation of their marriage heightened his dread. As the ceremony unfolded with traditional vows and heartfelt prayers, Jonathan performed his part flawlessly, his voice never betraying the panic that gripped him with every word he spoke. The congregation responded with joyous applause, completely enchanted by the grace and apparent love that the couple exhibited. However, the reality of the impending night, where no sermons or crowds could shield his vulnerabilities, loomed large in his mind. When the festivities moved to the reception, Jonathan continued to play the perfect groom under the watchful eyes of the community. Laughter and music filled the air, and Elaine shone with a happiness that made her almost ethereal. She was completely immersed in the joy of the day, her love for Jonathan and the future she imagined they would build together. Meanwhile, Jonathan navigated the celebration like a man walking towards his judgment, his heart heavy with the secret he had kept so carefully concealed. As night fell and the reception drew to a close, the newlyweds retired to their bridal suite, a beautiful room decorated with the same flowers that had graced the church. Elaine entered the room with dreams of a loving and intimate union finally being realized. However, Jonathan's steps faltered as he crossed the threshold, the weight of his deceit becoming nearly unbearable. The moment that Elaine had envisioned with such purity and love quickly turned into one of the most jarring and painful moments of her life. As they prepared to consummate their marriage, the truth that Jonathan had guarded so fiercely was exposed. His physical inadequacies, the source of his deep insecurities, became apparent. Elaine's initial reaction was one of confusion, which swiftly shifted to a profound sense of betrayal as she realized the extent of Jonathan's deception. The man she had loved and trusted, who had spoken so eloquently about truth and moral fortitude, had knowingly deceived her about something so fundamental. The implications of his actions, the vows of chastity, his fervent preaching on purity, suddenly appeared in a starkly different light. They were not just aspects of his faith, but had been manipulative tools to conceal his fear of inadequacy. Elaine's heartbreak was palpable, and her sense of betrayal deepened by the minute as the man before her seemed to shrink, his usual commanding presence dissolving into a visage of despair and desperation. Jonathan, for his part, felt his world collapsing around him. He had feared this moment, the revelation that could undo all that he had built, his reputation, his marriage, and most of all, the love of the woman he truly cherished. Their wedding night, which should have been a celebration of their love and union, instead ended with a chasm between them that seemed insurmountable. Elaine, overwhelmed by her emotions and the magnitude of Jonathan's betrayal, struggled to reconcile the man she thought she knew with the man who now stood before her, cloaked in deception and fear. Jonathan, realizing the pain he had caused and the potential ruin of his life and legacy, was left to grapple with the consequences of his actions. The truth finally laid bare under the harsh light of their wedding suite. As the initial shock of the revelation subsided, Elaine's mind raced with confusion and anguish. She had built her dreams around a man she believed epitomized integrity and faith, only to find those dreams shattered against the reality of his deceit. The room, once filled with the promise of shared future happiness, now felt suffocating to her. Elaine looked at Jonathan, seeing not her husband but a stranger cloaked in familiar features. Elaine's decision crystallized swiftly. She could not stay in a marriage founded on lies. The vows they had exchanged mere hours ago seemed like a mockery, echoes of a trust that was now irrevocably broken. She felt trapped, not just by Jonathan's deceit, but by the potential fallout of exposing this secret to the community that revered him. Yet, despite these fears, her resolve hardened. If she would leave, she had to reclaim the truth and integrity in her life, even if it meant standing alone against the man she once loved. Jonathan watched in horror as Elaine began to gather her belongings, her movements brisk and determined. His initial numbness gave way to a rising tide of desperation. He reached for the only tools he knew, words and faith. He began to recite scriptures invoking their sacred vows and the divine witness to their marriage, hoping to appeal to her spiritual convictions. "Elaine, please, we vowed before God to support each other through all trials," Jonathan pleaded, his voice cracking under the strain. "This is a test of our faith, of our vows. We can overcome this together, as husband and wife, as we promised." But Elaine's faith, though deeply rooted, could not blind her to the manipulation she now recognized. "Jonathan, vows are built on trust. And you broke that trust before we even made them, she countered, her voice steady despite the turmoil within her. This isn't just about what you hid from me, it's about why you used your faith, our faith, as a shield for your lies. How can I trust anything else you've ever said or will say? Jonathan's desperation grew as he realized that his usual eloquence and command over scripture were failing him. He grasped for anything that might make her stay, even attempting to cast their situation in a light of divine purpose. Lane, think about our mission, our congregation, the people who look up to us. We're meant to lead together. Doesn't that mean anything to you now? He implored, trying to weave their shared commitment to their community into a reason for her to reconsider. But Elaine was unmoved. It means everything, and that's why I can't stay. I have to be true to myself and to the people who trust us, who trust me. I won't build my life, our life, on dishonesty. I can't. I won't, she declared, her resolve clear and her path set. With her suitcase packed, Elaine took one last look around the room at the remnants of what should have been the start of a beautiful chapter in their lives. She then turned to Jonathan, her eyes sad but resolute. I hope one day you find the courage to be honest with yourself and everyone else. Until then, I need to walk this path alone. With those final words, she walked out, leaving Jonathan alone with the crushing weight of his exposed fears and the fallout that was sure to follow. His desperate attempts to salvage the situation had only driven her further away, cementing her decision to end the marriage that had begun under the pretense of a shared faith and commitment. Now, he was left to face not only the personal ramifications, but also the professional and spiritual consequences of his actions in a community where he had been a pillar of strength and morality. The peaceful silence of the night was shattered by a sudden, brutal act of violence. In a moment of sheer panic and desperation, Jonathan's fear of losing everything transformed into a horrific reality. As Elaine turned to leave, Jonathan, driven by a tumultuous mix of fear and despair, the altercation quickly escalated, and tragically, Elaine was struck down, her life ending in the very room that had symbolized the beginning of their shared future. Reeling from the shock of his own actions, Jonathan fled the scene, his mind a whirlwind of panic and regret. But the truth, as it always does, began to chase him down. Within hours, the police were on his trail, piecing together the evidence of the night's events, from the blood-stained bridal suite to the hasty escape captured by security cameras. The man who had once stood in the pulpit preaching about morality and truth was now the prime suspect in a murder investigation. At the first public investigation in the area, Jonathan set out to reinvestigate the murder investigation and kill him too. The community reeled from the news, struggling to reconcile the Jonathan they knew with the man who now stood accused of such a heinous act. His arrest and subsequent trial laid bare the layers of deceit that had underpinned his relationship with Elaine. What had been hidden behind closed doors was now public spectacle, a tale of moral failing and tragic loss that shook the very foundations of the town's faith in their leaders. As the court proceedings unfolded, evidence of Jonathan's deception and the violence it incited painted a damning picture. Convicted of second-degree murder, Jonathan was sentenced to a long term in prison, his fall from grace complete. The consequences of his actions extended far beyond the personal. They eroded the trust of his congregation and community, serving as a grim reminder of the destructive power of secrets and lies. And, as he liked to say, a pattern or two. Pity. Could anything have prevented this tragedy, or was it the inevitable outcome of a life built on deception? How does this story change your view on the responsibilities of those in positions of moral authority? In a relationship, how important is absolute honesty, and where do we draw the line between personal privacy and necessary transparency? This story moved you or made you think? Subscribe to True Crime Stories ZM for more deep dives into the dark intersections of human behavior and morality. Join the conversation and share your thoughts below. Could you forgive such a betrayal? Would you have seen the signs?